Okay. Uh, I have to say, this has been a delightful. I think it's been 6 weeks. This is the sixth episode of this particular adventure into a rabbi's view of women in the New Testament. That's probably how this should best be phrased, because I'm always thinking from a rabbinic literature point of view, from a TaNaKh, Hebrew Bible point of view. And of course, it was preceded by another lovely 6 or 7 weeks with looking at women in the apocryphal literature. Great for me because these are not things that I've done, not in this way, certainly not the New Testament material in this way. It was a chance for me to kind of collect my thoughts over the last 5, 6 years, especially in New Testament, of women, things that have stood out to me in the text. I'm always looking at the character of women in text. Something that's interested me since the 80s when I was in the Bible department, but also being the father of 5 daughters and at least being a wannabe feminist, wanting to see and understand a little bit about how men viewed women and how that came up, and how women's voices can still be heard even over the male dominance, and that figures into what we're going to be doing today. But before we begin, anything that we've done over the last few weeks, did somebody want to ask something about it or mention anything? We had I think some material that was new to many people here, if not to most people. Any favorites?
Favorites.
If Richard was here, Richard, for those that don't know, Richard is my is the butt of most of my jokes in Or Hamidbar. He's our treasurer. He's a wonderful, wonderful man. And I'm going to be doing a study session in his honor and in honor of his dog on dogs in the Jewish tradition. Magdalena, maybe you can put that up in the chat box for those that would like to join us, Or Hamidbar, on a Wednesday, April 15th. If Richard was here, I would say to him, his favorite woman that we did over these many women was probably the daughter of Herodias, who asked for John the Baptizer's head on a platter. That was an interesting figure. Anyway, so I've wasted enough time to get more people here. Let's take a look at this picture again. Very familiar picture that is appropriate for. And where did it go now? I just had it. Yo. Sorry. There we go. Very appropriate for the Easter period, the Easter time. I imagine this is a picture that people know. If not, they know variations of it. There are a number of variations of the Last Supper. This is Da Vinci's. Do we see any women at the table here?
Yes.
Yeah, that was unfair. That's a trick question. So you're probably referring to this one here, right? Correct,
Yes.
Eileen?
Yes.
Yeah. So big debate. After the Da Vinci Code, everybody thought this was Mother Mary, the Virgin Mary. But every scholarship, the art scholarship, says that this is, if any, there were 12 apostles here. If anybody, this is John, who's the most effeminate, for various reasons that I didn't go into. But I also kind of thought over the years, but no, actually, it's everybody agrees who knows anything about the art that these are only the men, and that's something we're going to look at today. Not the picture. That art history is an interesting thing, and I think there's modern art that's added women to the table. I can't look at this without thinking of that Mel Brooks scene. I should have brought that, but folks know from the Mel Brooks, what was it? History of the World Part Two, I guess. Are people familiar with that? Anyway, it's a good Google Mel Brooks Last Supper. Not now. Now, Megan, don't do it now. I can see you're about to do it now. No, I can see. I can. Google Mel Brooks and Last Supper, and it's not maybe it's disrespectful. I don't know. I think it's very, very funny. And anyway, let's get to our text today then. Okay, after all these introductions, um, and we have no choice. We've got to finish all the text today because we won't be meeting soon. I think next week already. I think you're meeting with with Rabbi Daniel, I think, and Jewish thinkers. Looks like a wonderful series. Um, some of my favorite thinkers. Isaiah, Yeshayahu Leibovich is on that list I saw, and a number of others. Okay, so here's the thing: the Last Supper appears in, as we call it, the Last Supper, in three of the Gospels. That is the Synoptic Gospels, the ones that are similar to each other, come from the same source, which are Luke, Mark, and Matthew. And it appears in a different way in John. We're going to look at the Gospel according to John. We're going to look at those two things. There's a debate that's raged since I don't know how long, but if you ask many people, they'll say, "Oh, the Last Supper was the Seder," right? You've heard that probably before, right? But that's disputed for many years in biblical scholarship. There's a number of reasons for it. Perhaps we'll lift up those reasons as we go right now. But I did bring it now because I think it's appropriate this time of year. It certainly happens in the time of year of Passover. That's what we're looking, right? That's whether it's the Seder or not, to me is immaterial. But what we want to look at today are, where are the women in the story? Where might they be? That's our topic for today. So, Megan, I will ask you to begin with the Gospel according to Luke, chapters 22 to 24. Notice the three dots maybe after the fourth and fifth and sixth paragraph. There's three dots. I did skip around because we just don't have time to do the entire pericope, as we say in biblical scholarship. Go ahead, Megan.
Now the festival of unleavened bread, which is called the Passover, was near. The chief priests and the scribes were looking for a way to put Jesus to death, for they were afraid of the people. Then Satan entered into Judas, called Iscariot, who was one of the 12. He went away and conferred with the chief priests and officers of the temple police about
Go there, teachers.
Go ahead.
temple police about how he might betray him to them. They were greatly pleased and agreed to give him money. So he consented and began to look for an opportunity to betray him to them when no crowd was present.
Okay, not our topic today. Yehuda Ish Krayot, Judas Iscariot, and the betrayal and the money that was given to him. One of the 12, the fallen apostle, if you will, but does set up this whole thing. There's preparation for as the people, as Jesus's folks are preparing, as we'll see in a second. This is what Judas Iscariot is doing, but this is in that time of preparation before Pesach. Go ahead.
Then came the day of unleavened bread, on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. So Jesus sent Peter and John, saying, "Go and prepare the Passover meal for us, that we may eat it." They asked him, where do you want us to make preparations for it? "Listen," he said to them, "when you have entered the city, a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him into the house he enters, and say to the owner of the house, 'The teacher asked you, where is the guest room, where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' He will show you a large room upstairs, already furnished. Make preparations for us there." So they went and found everything as he had told them, and they prepared the Passover meal.
Okay. So again, our topic is, where are the women, if at all? Can you just imagine, right? It's the day of the Paschal lamb sacrifice in the evening, and then they're just making plans for the dinner, for the Seder. Can you imagine that, right? What about the napkins? What about the table? What about the chametz? Everything, right? But still, this is how it's set up. And I endeavored to put in bold little shortcuts here for us to see where women might be. And so go ahead and prepare the Passover meal for us. We had stories that we went through before where there are women present, not just the three Marys that we talked about. Oh, we got the sound problems again. I think let's try. I'm gonna try to. Okay. It's not just the three women that we talked about. Certainly not the women around John the Baptizer, and certainly not the women of Paul. That's it. But there are women in Jesus's life. And they're part of the entourage. They're part of of the group. They come up a lot, and that's the purpose of our study today, is see where they come up around the Passover story. We're on Passover now, Pesach. And one of the places to see them is prepare the Passover meal for us. Us was not just the guys in that picture, Da Vinci's picture. Us was a larger group of people, men and women. And also eat the Passover with my disciples. Women were disciples. This idea that only men were disciples, we'll have to talk about in a second, why that's so pronounced in what we understood or what people have understood afterwards. Go ahead, verse 14.
When the hour came, he took his place at the table, and the apostles with him. He said to them, I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I tell you, I will not eat it until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of God. Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he said, Take this and divide it among yourselves. For I tell you that from now on I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes. Then he took a loaf of bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, This is my body, which is given to you. Do this in remembrance of me. And he did the same with the cup after supper, saying, This cup is poured out for you. This cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood. But see, the one who betrays me is with me, and his hand is on the table. For the Son of God is going as it has been determined, but woe to the one by whom he is betrayed. Then they began to ask one another which one of them could be who would do this.
Okay, so let's take a look at all the different things here. I'm guessing there are some questions or some comments. I'll just say, from a woman's point of view, again, we have the apostles and among yourselves. There's no reason to assume that that Jesus is only speaking to men. There could be women in that group of whom he's speaking. But what else do we see? This is a central passage. It may not be familiar. It probably is not familiar to everybody here. But if this is, what are your questions when you read this? What are your questions? Remember, we're in the context of Pesach, the Passover. So Sasha's asking, why is there a loaf of bread? For those that don't know, Sasha's my wife. She sits on the couch at the other side of the room. A loaf of bread. So a loaf of bread can be a whole matzah, right? We don't, in the same way we say, look at when we were kids. I remember saying, why are we saying a motzi on matzah, right? But because bread is there's leavened bread and there's unleavened bread. So that's that, but that's a common question people go. And actually, some people say that to say, oh, this means that it wasn't the Seder yet. It was still the day beforehand. I don't think, I think that's not a deep understanding. Anything else? Eileen. Oh, go ahead, Megan, then Eileen.
Well, it is the, I don't know if it's the beginning, but it's the transubstantiation of, it's sort of a funny passage to me, because thinking of drinking the blood, and we're getting into a different way of doing things, but it's where I think the Catholic Church has taken it that it actually turns into the blood of Christ and the blood and the body. So the other sorry.
Okay, somebody has two things open. Rhea, I think Rhea, it's you. Okay, now she's gone. Go ahead again. Sorry.
And the bread is his body. It's it to me it gets a little bit, it goes back to where, I don't know, it goes back to it goes backward in time in eating your, and I don't know, eating your God. It's a
Okay. So this opens up a whole can of worms about what does this holy eating mean? What is communion, the Eucharist? And we're gonna that whole issue is gonna hover around us. And this is a key text, not just the Catholic Church. This is all of Christianity has fielded this in different ways. And part of the Reformation and Luther and others was to change how that was seen, perhaps. So But this is one of the texts, not the only. This is one of the texts in which the transformation happens from what we would call kiddush, saying a blessing over the wine at the beginning of the meal, and a blessing over the bread. Right. So that's that we're very much in our play. Is that only at the Seder? No, that's every Shabbat, that's every Chag, right? But that does see we do see how there's at least remnants of the idea for some people that this was the Seder. And then what do you do at the Seder? What's the whole point of the Seder?
Coming together.
Okay, that's from what. Let's go back to biblical. What's the point of the Seder from a Torah point of view? There is no Seder,
Remembering the Exodus,
right? Or telling this story.
Telling this story.
Higadata levincha, hence the Haggadah. What are they telling here? If we have stories about the rabbis talking about, how many plagues were on that is, and all the different and the miracles, the talking around the table here becomes about who's going to be the one that's going to betray Jesus. That's an interesting thing here. In other words, they're set up to talk. There's another scene where Jesus says it's the one who dipped at the same table as me. The dipping is also part. There's a lot of elements of Pesach here. But this phrase in verse 20, this cup is the new covenant in my blood. New covenant, that's the New Testament.
It's
Same
Rabbi.
thing. Yes.
I don't know, because we're on Leviticus right now, but it seems like we're talking about all these things are in sacrifices. You got all this blood and dealing with sacrifice. Also, the bread, you do the burnt offering. So also he becomes like the new sacrifice.
Right. Except for you don't need to go to Leviticus yet. We're going to Leviticus. That's what we're reading Parashat Shavua.
Right. That's what I mean. It's just
right. But this is Pesach, right? We don't need to go
with the Paschal Lamb.
Exactly. So the question, we'll see a little bit later that Jesus is that instead of the Paschal Lamb. Right, there's a lot of association here, but now I'm going to bring us back. There's no way not to lift these issues. If there's something else somebody wants to, Eileen, did you want to ask about something?
I just want to know how he knew that there was somebody at the table that was going to betray him. I mean, he knew people were against, there had been this uprising, but how did he know there was someone at the table?
Well, he is Jesus after all. I mean,
No,
he's a
Thank you.
prophet. Not only is a prophet, he's an elevated prophet, right? But definitely he's a prophet, right? There's all sorts of things throughout the New Testament in which he knows what's going on. And he's telling people in such a way, you don't understand what's happening right now. This is the real thing. Part of the message of the Gospels of Jesus' character is that Jesus comes to reveal the truth about reality, about the world. And this is one aspect of that. Yeah.
And he's telling a story about the future rather than
about the Yetziat Mitzrayim, than the Exodus. Okay, all these things are true and all the things, but I want to bring us back to, that's the danger of doing it right now, but I want to bring us back to our theme, which is, the women, what will we, so it says, they in this here, then they began to ask one another, perhaps I should have made the they in bold as well. We naturally, I think many of us naturally assume, it's the apostles talking amongst themselves, which of you are going to be, but maybe it's maybe it's the women also, maybe it's everybody else. There's no reason. We have this bias, we have this gender bias, right? In the way that we read it. And I want to lift us out, see if we can get out of that a little bit. Okay. Let's see. Susan, you want to read? We're at verse 24, a dispute.
Yes. A dispute also arose among them as to which of them was to be regarded as the greatest. But he said to them, the kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those in authority over them are called benefactors. But not so with you. Rather, the greatest among you must become like the youngest, and the leader like one who serves. For who is greater, the one who is at the table or the one who serves? Is it not the one at the table? But I am among you as one who serves. You are those who have stood by me in my trials, and I confer on you, just as my Father has conferred on me, a kingdom, so that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and you will sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel.
Okay, let's talk about here. Where might the women be?
Serving.
Well, yes, definitely that's in the background here. So, but that means that the women are there. They're in the room, they're listening, and it means that Jesus is lifting up those women serving. An anecdote. Sorry, you know me. I can't resist. But one of my greatest teachers of being a rabbi was not an official teacher of mine. It was Rabbi Jack Cohn, Yaakov Cohn, Zichrono Livracha. He was one of the founders of Mevakshei Derech, the first egalitarian synagogue in Israel from the early '60s. He himself was a disciple of Mordechai Kaplan, Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan, and moved to Israel in the late '50s to be the Hillel director at Hebrew University. Things we don't think about in the '50s. A great man, and he was not the rabbi of Mavakshei Derech. I was hired. I was the first hire. They were an absolutely volunteer organization, except for maybe an administrator. Their first hire, I was in rabbinical school, and I was hired to be the education director. He taught me so much about what it is to be a rabbi. One of the things he taught me was we don't have services Erev Pesach, right? There every Erev Shabbat, every Shabbat evening, no, because he says when you have services Erev Pesach, the men come to services and the women stay at home and prepare the Seder. He says in Pesach, everybody has to prepare the Seder. What a great lesson that was. And it wasn't obvious to me. This is 1989. Okay, let's a little bit defend myself, right? Coming also out of the Orthodox world, but what a great lesson! What a great lesson! And I haven't had for Pesach Erev Pesach services in any synagogue I've done. I've always canceled them. Okay, it makes it easier for a lot of people, I think. But back to this, though, the women are definitely around here, even though he does go to talk about the comparison is with the Gentiles and the Lord. And yes, officially, men are in the central position. I'm not disputing that. But here, at least in the context of the Seder or the Passover meal, Jesus is definitely including the women without saying the women. Yeah. Of course, it includes men who serve as well, but okay. All right, go ahead. So the three dots at the end of that paragraph, we're skipping to over the rest of chapter 22, the beginning of chapter 23, towards the bottom of the first page. Go ahead, Susan.
As they led him away, they seized the man, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming from the country, and they laid the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus.
Sorry, I needed to set this up beforehand. In the meantime, he goes to trial and they find him guilty and he's sent to be crucified. Now we're at the scene afterwards, right? So there's a question there. If it was Erev Pesach, if this was the Seder and he was led from there to the court the next day, that's the first day of Yom Tov. That's not realistic that there would have been the Romans would not have had the trial on the first day of the holiday. That would have caused a riot, right? So this is not a reflection. These are not historical texts. There's historical memory in them, but they're not exactly historical text, I think. Go ahead, Susan. Sorry, we're at verse 27.
A great number of the people followed him, and among them were women who were beating their breasts and wailing for him. But Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For the days are surely coming when they will say, 'Blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed.' Then they will begin to say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if they do this when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?
Okay. Any before I say what I'd like to say on this, any comments?
It's a great line.
Which of the lines is a great line?
When the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry? That's a great line.
Mm.
I mean, it's
So there's no doubt about the women in this case, right? The women are central to this passage, right? Okay. And one might argue, well, since they're mentioned here specifically, that means beforehand they're not mentioned. No, that doesn't work because the de facto mentioning of groups is always, in fact, if an entire group, the language is going to be in masculine form. Uh, so and in general, women are mentioned specifically when there's a particular thing they want to say. Why of all places, why are women mentioned this way here? Other than perhaps this is how the story actually happened or was remembered. In just a moment, Ria. But why are women? Oh, Ria, you go ahead first. Go ahead.
Oh, it's not about this, so go ahead if you want to
Okay.
continue.
So why are women mentioned here?
I think that he has an impact on women. I mean, that he has a large following among women.
More
And
than men?
more, well, not necessarily more than men, but equal, that compared to what normal Judaism would have, that they are part of his movement and that they're part of the whole group, you know. It's just not men. And I think he's always has this concern for women and their rights and their social being and their holiness.
Okay.
Can
What
I,
are they
can I,
doing? Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead, Ria.
yeah, I wanted to say something about this too. And now that James, that you had said this, uh, I think that these statements are really as an example of the other. And it isn't necessarily that it's looking at women's lives, that he's looking at women's lives, but these are the others that don't fulfill what they were meant to fulfill.
Mm.
And that if you take away the gender or this, women and men, that this is a class of people that are the other, the servers, the women who don't reproduce.
Okay. So
So
so I would agree with you when the servers, but I think that this particular paragraph is womanly because of the mention of the breasts.
yeah, but it hasn't fulfilled. The breast
So,
hasn't fulfilled
uh-huh.
its task, and that there are groups of people who are
Yeah,
unable
that's
to fulfill their tasks.
good
So
point. The women are symbolic.
yeah,
Yeah. I get
yeah,
that. Oh, good, good. All right. That's a better. Yeah, the daughters of Jerusalem do not weep for me. I think is a quote probably from one of the I think there's something of a quote in there. I didn't go deep on that, but this idea of this, and what might that mean for normative Judaism, the Pharisaic Judaism at the time? What's Jesus's comment according to the gospel here on on a religion, a culture, a relationship with God which is not fulfilling itself? I've been thinking a lot about Jesus, a lot about Christianity over the last week. Not only preparing this, but being in church as much as I am on holidays. I tend to go to show up in honor of my colleagues here, and I listen and I pray with them as well. I'm thinking a lot about why Christianity works for so many people so much more than Judaism does. Now that's not entirely true because there's percentages of people, of course, but you see, there's all sorts of things which are purely technical, like the fact that let's set aside the Catholics and the Episcopalians right now, but in the Protestant churches, services are an hour long, right? There's a lot more music, a lot more. There's communal singing in a different way. There's all sorts of things going on. Maybe more similar to a Reformed tradition, but instead of what I see often in Reformed synagogues that I've been to, where it's performative and people are watching that performance, or the conservative Judaism that I grew up with and I rebelled against, there's just a lot of communality to the whole thing, and the messages are so simple. I would say perhaps oversimple from my point of view, but they work. They work, and there's no expectation to go down deep the way that we're doing right now. For instance, when a text is read, this is not what's better, what's worse. I'm looking to see why is that working? Why do I feel often from our communal point of view things don't work so much in the service? I think in study I think that I'm very happy with. And this reflects a little bit about the fact that Or Hamidbar is a group of older folks who it's harder and harder for them to come together physically in the same place. Anyway, that's a lot on my mind right now. But back to who Jesus was this fulfillment of this relationship with God, which wasn't happening so much, wasn't happening in a satisfactory way for many of the people. Yes, Ria.
So I wanted to ask, and it's sort of looking backward, about this being a Seder. That the Seder that we know today is not that old. When is it? Maybe during the Middle Ages? When
It depends what you mean by the Seder we know today. The Haggadah, the way we
with
know it.
the Haggadah.
Yeah, the Haggadah,
Yeah.
the way we know it, a lot of liturgy, Jewish liturgy, only kind of became set after the advent of the printing press. So, Scotty, printing press, is that 16th century?
Well, and also the whole setup of the children asking the four questions.
No. So a lot of
and
that stuff is written. A lot of that stuff comes from TaNaKh periods, not exactly the way it's set up, right? But there's conversations about the 4 or 5 cups of wine in early Talmudic literature. There's conversations about the maror, about charoset. There's things that were not done as part of the Paschal Lamb thing. But the Seder per se, they're sitting around. There's stories that the rabbis sitting in Bnei Brak, right? It's been incorporated into the liturgy of the Haggadah. That is the things we say, even though they're really, as my teacher, Professor Avigdor Shenan, who I think some of you perhaps have met over the years, what's his name, Ari in Santa Ana, who does those lovely study things. Avigdor taught us, that first of all, the prayer books and the Haggadah, part of that, they just kept bringing on material. In the case of the Haggadah, it was a handbook. How do you, as the person leading the Seder, these are some of the ideas you might use. And then they became set in stone to create a 2.5 hour long, dialogue by some old man who happened to be the grandfather of the thing, and everybody's futzing around, and now they're on their phones, whatever, all the things. But there was something going on. There's a lot of literature about it already in the first few centuries of the Common Era. In the first century, no, there wasn't a Seder yet in the way we know it, because there was still the Paschal Lamb, but something was going on. And so this material, I mean, Luke is considered to be towards the second half of the first century. So after the destruction of the temple, but in any case, and I'm also not talking about history here, Ria. The historical Jesus and that kind of stuff. There's a whole section of scholarship that deals with that. To me, that's less interesting. What I'm interested in is what is the text. In this case, Luke, and I only brought one of the other 2 gospels that have this kind of tradition. The Synoptic Gospels tell it a little bit differently. So I chose this one because of the amount of mention of women in it. What does he want to tell us? That's kind of what interests me here. Let's is anything else burning? Let's move ahead. Ria, why don't you read from 44? Just need you to unmute, please.
Wait a second. I have to go find it.
Okay. We're on the second page, the second side. Page 2, it says at the bottom, never,
Yeah.
the top says never before. So verse 44, third line.
1, 2, 3. 24. Okay. But on the first day of the week at early dawn.
No. This is 44, the third line from the top of the page.
Okay.
Second paragraph. It was now about noon.
Okay, wait a second. Oh, I got it. It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m, while the sun's light failed, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus, crying out with a loud voice, said, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." Having said this, he breathed his last. When the centurion saw what had taken place, he praised God and said, "Certainly this man was innocent." And when all the crowds who had gathered there for this spectacle saw what had taken place, they returned home, beating their breasts. But all his acquaintances, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at the distance watching these things.
Yeah, that's not to say that the group before didn't have women in it, right? But these women were singled out because they were his chasidot, they were his talmidot, his disciples, already from the Galilee, right? So it shows this in a little comment like this shows how much women were part of it all along. Now, if they were part of it all along, well, yeah. So this is up until the crucifixion, until the death. We'll get to the stone in just a second, Golgotha. Why were men the ones who were talked about so much at the Seder, only the ones who were named in this and other parallel passages? And there's two ways of understanding that. I'm jumping to a conclusion, but I'm afraid we're not going to have time for much else today. So what I found in the scholarship is that one way of explaining it from a feminist point of view is this is mansplaining, or this is androcentric, typical androcentric. You just talk about the men and you don't talk about the women. That's one way of looking, and that would have been the initial way, I think, of I'm guessing of the feminist readings of the New Testament. They shut us out and they just talk about that. But of course we were there. They just shut us out. Say the women. I'm sorry that I'm doing it that way. Another way of looking at it, and I don't think it's apologetic, and it's a female, a feminist scholar who wrote this, is that it could very well be that only the apostles were mentioned there. It's not, other men were not mentioned, but the apostles, just like that picture we saw from Leonardo da Vinci, the apostles became important for the development of the church. And so the fact that there were a whole congregation of people that were around, which had probably half women, it's not to the point. It's not to the point, because what happened? Now, you might say, well, how come there are only men apostles that are mentioned, not female apostles? Yes, that's an overall problem of society. But anyway, what I wanted to bring up is, where were the women in this story? And here, now we're going to have far more. Now, Jesus has died at the cross and has been buried in Golgotha, which is Golgotha means the skull, and it means a crop of limestone where there was kind of something that reminded people of the stone. Anybody know where is that today? What we call that today? Anybody? The place where Jesus was buried in Jerusalem? Nobody? The Holy Sepulchre. Holy Sepulchre. And most of the Christian denominations have in that entrance, which there is a cave at the bottom. It's a whole complex that you kind of go down into. If you've been there, there are 12 different church chapels kind of areas there, with all different kinds of Orthodox and the Roman Catholic. It was in the news last week because the Israeli police wouldn't let the Roman Catholic cardinal have this prayer there. Okay, there's another place which is outside of the walls of the old city, which is where some of the Protestants feel it was inaccessible, the Holy Sepulchre at the time. So they found another place that was accessible, that they made their own, that has a kind of a skull-like limestone look to it. Anyway, that's where we are right now. So let's go ahead with 33. I have a lot of big. Carol from Indiana, would you like to read? Are you a reader?
I can read, but I don't know what you're reading from.
Oh, you don't have the text. Okay, the text is in the chat box. I'm sorry, I should have said that. I think you may be the first time you're with us. I apologize.
Yes,
I
just found you recently.
So going forward in the chat box, you can click on if you go up two things above the flyer for the dog lecture, there's download the study sheet. And so if you'd like to, then it'll be on your screen. I can come back to you, but let's Eileen, why don't you read from 55?
The women who had come with him from Galilee followed, and they saw the tomb and how his body was laid. Then they returned and prepared spices and ointments. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they went to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but that when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly two men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be handed over to the hands of sinners and be crucified, and on the third day rise again." Then they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves. Then he went home, amazed at what had happened.
Okay, so if you've never seen this passage, it's quite something, isn't it? Right, to see a typical, again, the women know the truth. The women are compassionate with the dead, bringing the oils of the preparation somehow, of what, and I think it's a little bit complicated, but ancient tombs where you would lie out the body on like a shelf in one of these caves, these limestone caves. The body would be laid out on a shelf in the entranceway, and then after it deteriorated, then the bones would be collected in another part. We know this because of archaeology. So perhaps that's why, the treating of the body, again, not our topic, but the fact that the women were involved in it, the women that come out, and it's the women that find out the truth first. It's the women that know before the men, even Peter, before the men, that Christ is risen. And if you've been to an Easter vigil, that's the high point of an Easter vigil on a Saturday night is when after the darkness, they turn on the lights and Christ is risen. I've seen it in different languages in different parts of the world, and it's always kind of, even if you don't know the language, you can figure out what's happening. Um, and uh, and that it's at that point that Lent ends. That's the end of Lent, at that point, and traditionally done at midnight, right? Here in Palm Springs, it was done at 8 o'clock, from 8 to 9:30 or whatever, in the evening. Um, but we've seen it in many places over the years. Okay. So any comments or questions about this? Mostly about the woman part of it. Okay. All right. As I mentioned, three Gospels, Mark, Matthew, and Luke, are the synoptic Gospels. They have a version similar but different in details on this particular thing. It's in different places in the book as well, the Gospel, the way it is. Fascinating topic unto itself. But John is the fourth Gospel, which is different in many ways, in a lot of different ways. And so I brought just one passage from here, but the trial in John is the day before Pesach. So John does not have this tradition of having the Last Supper, which is the Seder. That's definitely not John. And there, James, there it's very clear that John compares this Paschal Lamb. What's going on there with you guys and your Paschal Lamb? That's not the real Paschal Lamb. Jesus is the real Paschal Lamb, Lamb of God. You may know from Christian liturgy, etc. And then, yeah, okay. I think that's enough of that for
Rabbi,
now.
of
Yeah.
the gospel, which ones were written directly by his disciples?
As far as I know, none of them. But as far as I don't think anybody thinks they're exactly the disciples. I don't. It depends who. I'm sure there are more traditional Christians that believe that actually that's that. And who is the who? Yeah. I think that some, Matthew is the latter part of the first century, so Jesus has been gone already for 70 years or 60 years. So they're all written with a perspective, a historical perspective, as opposed to Paul, who didn't meet Jesus but is writing much closer to Jesus's time. Yeah. Again, I'm not that much of an expert at this, so I probably shouldn't talk anymore. James, why don't you read from us now we go to the Gospel according to John, and because it's Passover. This is a Passover section. Go ahead.
Six,
And women in Passover. Yeah.
6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the home of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead.
Right. So we're not doing that story today, but an interesting story of itself. The kind of precursor of Jesus' resurrection is Jesus being instrumental in resurrecting Lazarus, and which is very similar to Elijah and Elisha as well. Another day. Go ahead.
There they gave a dinner for him. Martha served, and Lazarus was the one of those reclining with him. Mary took a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard, anointed Jesus' feet, and wiped them with her hair. The house was filled with, excuse me, the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, the one who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor?" He said this is not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief and he kept the common purse and used to steal that was put into it. Jesus says, "Leave her alone. She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me."
Okay. What do we think? Women, how are women portrayed here? So
Well,
Sasha says women are portrayed here as visionary. Well, particularly Mary, right? Yeah. Go ahead, James.
well, I hate to admit it, but I was watching The Chosen, and they do this scene, and one of the things is you get the sense that Judas is really he runs all the finances for the group, and he's been stealing from it, and that the reason why he was upset that she spent so much on the perfume was because he could it might show that he was stealing the books because they were short of money always. So that was one thing. The other thing is, yeah, she took it in honor of Jesus, of his greatness.
Okay. So you agree with Sasha that she's the one who knows that she knows the truth. This
Right.
anointing.
Well, yeah, once again, going back to what I've seen on The Chosen, I don't know she
No,
always has deep,
James, let's stick to this text. Okay.
yeah, but no, but she has deep, deep faith in him,
Yeah. And
always.
but it's a strange way of anointing. It's the feet. Where do you usually anoint a king or a priest? On their head, exactly. Yeah. So it's
But,
strange. And also,
but
what she's wiping it with her hair. Like, what is that about? And I have not found since I saw this. I was privileged to teach the Gospel according to John with my friend Dr. Reverend Stephen Kinney from Texas. We took 11 months. Some of you were part of that group, and I did not find any kind of satisfying explanation other than between the feet and the hair. This is to show this is different. This is, even her hair, which should have been wrapped up, not covered probably, but at least up in a bun or in a yeah, not out like that. That was considered to be immodest during rabbinic times, and we saw that during Susanna when we looked at the book of Susanna, the story of Susanna as well. But wiping her hair, something that, in other words, something so immodest and something so strange, and something so opulent, using all this money. The money involved here, was the amount that it cost would have been worth, I think I saw 300 days of work, right? A dinar. Anyway, somebody was about to say something though. I think
yeah, I
Carol.
was
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Does
Carol,
it
did you want to
remind?
say something?
Um, I, well, I was just thinking about the hair in pictures that I know that artists draw the pictures. It often shows women having long hair, but they're covered with a scarf of some kind. So I
Yeah.
didn't know if her hair would be down or not. If she's not married, maybe her hair is down. I don't know.
Yeah, those are things that developed afterwards. I think hair, I think is pretty much consensus from a historical point of view in the first part of the first millennium is that women who, an act of modesty was to have their hair gathered as opposed to having it out that we worked at. And yeah, anyway, James, you were going to say something.
Yeah, anything connection with like with the Abraham story with the the three angels that travel and he washes their feet. Like
I don't know. There's a lot of washing of feet. We know that one because it's in the Torah portion, right? There's other washings of feet around. So I don't know going backwards, perhaps, but going forwards, and also probably mentioned perhaps in the Roman Catholic and the Episcopal traditions, they still do the Maundy Thursday washing of feet. I don't know if anybody been present. It's kind of interesting. There was I think the previous pope was famous of washing the feet of the poor people where he was, and you see those kinds of things. The whole thing is really interesting. But
I was going to
back,
say,
go ahead.
our synagogue is two doors down from an Episcopal church. So we're kind of friends with them and we invite them to events, Passover things. They invite us to things. And I know that on their list of things was this past Thursday was the washing of the feet.
All right, it's called
And
Maundy.
then they were going to have a big meal afterwards.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Where are you in Indiana?
Kokomo,
Okay, all
which
right.
is
Cool
about
name.
50 miles north of Indianapolis.
Okay. And Barbara, you wanted to say something.
Yeah. Getting back to Judas, wasn't his actions sort of the basis of a lot of anti-Semitism because his name was Judas? Sounds like Jew. And even throughout throughout history, wasn't that sort of the basis? Because he betrayed Christ.
Yeah, yes.
To get arrested and everything. So it
Right.
just went on and on after
Right.
after Christ was crucified and everything.
Yeah. And although his name Yehuda is not particularly, Yehuda Shimon, the names are some are biblical, some are Greek names of the apostles. His is the one who became, the most treacherous, right? Judas.
Well, it sounds like Jew. So
So,
maybe
if you're saying, so I don't know that that's why the tradition picked that one because his name is Yuda because it's anti-Jew. I don't think that's what happened. I think it happened to be one of the names, and it happens to be it dovetailed with later or with the accusation that it's the Jews that killed Jesus. I think because of Judah. I don't know that it was. I'm not convinced that it was made. It was created that way. It probably reflects a historical tradition of a particular man who was, so I don't know. Unlike, say, I don't know if you were with us when we did the book of Judith, where, at least according to my teacher Zakovich, the author chose that name on purpose as a contra to Esther, who had a pagan name, and Judith, who has a very Jewish name. Anyway, but it's certainly an interesting thing to continue to think about. What are names and how do they, what were they before, then during the story, and what happened with them afterwards? And certainly Judas became very, very connected to anti-Semitic thinking. But going back to, there's another woman here, Martha. What is she doing? She's serving, right? So and it's kind of like Martha, one might say Martha's, oh, she's in her place. But Mary, she's doing something that the guy should be involved in that kind of stuff. There is an argument between Martha and Mary that we did when we were looking at the three Marys. If anybody remembers, Martha's saying that Mary's sitting with Jesus and learning Torah, and she's doing all the work. and wants Jesus to come in. So there's the tension there. But my job is to bring up where are the women in the Last Supper. This is not the Last Supper, but this is the preparation for Pesach. And let's finally go to this last section, which is if you can stay with us for, I think we can do it in 5 minutes. I'm sorry to go over time, but Corinthians 11, you may remember, is perhaps for its infamy in that was a section about the hair covering and men and women. Apropos what Carol, what you brought up before, and if you want to take a look at the whole chapter of 1 Corinthians 11, you'll see some interesting talk there about head covering, not covering. But let's go to this one here. Is the text in front of you? Barbara, do you want to read? Or Carol, you have a text? Go ahead, Carol, go ahead, read from 1 Corinthians.
Text.
Please go ahead then.
Now in the following instructions I do commend you, because when you come together, it is not the better, but the worse. For to begin with, when you come together as a church, I hear that there are divisions among you, and to some extent I believe it. Indeed, there have to be factions among you, for only so will it become clear who among you are genuine. When you come together, it is not really to eat the Lord's Supper, for when the time comes to eat, each of you proceeds to eat your own supper, and one goes hungry, and another becomes drunk. What do you have? Do you not have households to eat and drink in? Or do you show contempt for the church of God and humiliate those who have nothing? What should I say to you? Should I commend you? In the matter, I do not commend you.
Okay, we're going to go on in a second, but this is Paul writing to the community, the fledgling community in Corinthians, and he hears that they have some problems because they're doing this custom, the Lord's Supper. The Lord's Supper is, according to late in the beginning of Acts, is something that was done daily, and this is kind of an echo of that picture that we saw of the Passover day or Passover night Seder of the wine and the bread thing, what we call communion or Eucharist or other names. So in Acts, in the beginning of Acts chapter 4, it's weekly, it's daily, but by chapter 20, it becomes something that is weekly. And to this very day, there are those that do the Eucharist, the communion, weekly. There are those that do it daily. So, for instance, monastics do it daily. Some Roman Catholic churches, you'll find maybe there's a group of people that do it every day. I don't know about regular churches on the street, but my friends at TaNaKh, where I'll be in a few weeks, there's communion is done daily. They're monastics. In Roman Catholic churches, in Episcopal churches, and I would imagine some others as well, they do it every week. And in many of the Protestant traditions, it's once a month. So whatever it is, whatever they're doing, whether it's with grape juice in a Methodist church, or whether it's wine in a Catholic church, or whether it's the wafers, or whether it's actual bread used in different places, whatever it is, this is kind of an imitation of that original meal that already in Paul's time, so this is mid-first century, this is being done around the world, or the world at the time, around the Roman Empire. And it was done in a bad way. It was done not for the sake of God, the Shem Shamayim, it was for the sake of heaven. It was done because people are horsing around. So that's one part of it is they're eating and drinking not for the purpose, for the liturgical purpose. So Carol, go on to the next paragraph.
For I received from the Lord what I also handed on to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night when he was betrayed, took a loaf of bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body that is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, he took the cup, also the supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, You proclaim the Lord's death until he comes.
Okay. Now, we think of Kiddush. We think of doing this every Friday night. This at some point was moved from Shabbat to Sunday because of the resurrection. Maybe also to differentiate from the Jewish tradition as Christianity moved from the auspices of Judaism to something independent. But the eating is meaningful eating. And what's clear here is that it wasn't done in a church. These are done in people's homes. Now, my point of all this is that there's men and women equally in each of these homes. The women are certainly there. So, Barbara, perhaps you can help us finish up from verse 27.
I don't have the.
Oh, okay. All right. So you go ahead. Go ahead, Carol. Go ahead and finish 27 onward.
Whoever therefore eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord is in an unworthy manner will be answerable for the body and blood of the Lord. Examine. I got my glasses back on. Examine yourselves, and only then eat of the bread and drink of the cup. For all who eat and drink without discerning the body, and eat and drink judgment against themselves. For this reason, many of you are weak and ill, and some have died. But if we judged ourselves, we would not be judged. But when we are judged by the Lord, we are disciplined, so that we may not be condemned along with the world. So then, my brothers and sisters, when you come together to eat, wait for one another. If you are hungry, eat at home, so that when you come together, it will not be for your condemnation. About the other things, I will give instructions when I come.
So interesting stuff. It's like and so this is historical in that I think I'm pretty sure that most scholarship believes this is Paul writing this to a real life community that's going through some turmoil as to some social stuff, whatever. My whole point is to show there's men and women here equally. This is not just about the men. But with time, as the New Testament was translated into religious customs and laws, of course, it's the men who took over. And in presenting everything, it's only natural that by the time Da Vinci paints his painting, that it's only the men, it's only the apostles around, and in many of the things. Now, I'm sure we didn't do this justice. I'm sure I did not do this justice. The best I could do. I want you to know, though, I had a great time with these last 7 weeks. And I want to thank all of you for coming and making that possible, and for us to study together as we've been doing on and off for 6 years now, I think, right? Many of us, some of us even longer, but certainly those of you that have your origins in Orange County and Orange County tentacles going offwards. I think that Magdalena would like to say something. Is that why you're here?
Well,
Oh, here you are. Oh, you're there, Marcia. Sorry.
David, I just wanted to say on behalf of the Jewish Collaborative, thank you so much for being one of truly our scholars in residence, and for all the journeys that you take us on that wouldn't be doable by a lot of our colleagues. And it's so interesting because, for me, I just want to say, and I hope it finds its way into so many different world traditions that are much larger and more pervasive than ours is. Helps me feel a connection to the greater world, of which I do often feel as I'm a minority of, and so enlightening. And I've gone back and I've watched the classes that I've missed, and I've loved them. And I look forward to studying more with you. I want to thank everybody who's here, for all the people who've donated to make this class possible. And I hope you'll join us beginning next week with Daniel Levine for 5 weeks on sort of a continuation of the class he taught last summer for the history of modern Jewish philosophy and theology. But this is focusing on 5 persona that are lesser that get sort of highlighted lesser than sort of the bigger names in our history, but how they've really influenced the way we in America as Jews and in Israel really think about the world. So join us, and more to come. But I want to wish you all a wonderful Moadim L'Simcha, happy Passover, and so grateful that you're here. Thank you. And if you haven't donated yet and you'd like to, we'd be most grateful.
Please do. All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Chag Sameach, Moadim L'Simcha. Thank you, Madalena.